Megumi stands, I apologize. Today we're going to be talking about your goats. Not my goats, your goats. If you came here expecting Megumi glaze, unconditional character praise, and or top 1 Megumi speculations, I'm sorry to say, but that's not the focus. Today we need to set things straight with the cold, hard truth about Megumi Fushiguro's character. We need to take a deep dive into Megumi's strengths, his weaknesses, and oh yeah, his potential. Right now, I'm sure you brothers and sisters get the picture. Megumi is not looking the best right now. He is in the most horrible situation that he has ever been in his life, and right now it really must be hard to be a fan of his or seriously invest in Fushiguro's character, because the community's reaction to Megumi's hardship is ruthless. Megumi has lost his beloved sister Sumiki and his surrogate father / sensei Gojo, and they both fell by his own powers. He has lost all meaning in his life, and he fell into darkness, just letting himself drown in evil. And collectively, the Jujutsu Kaisen community was not having it. Bum Gumi, Legumi, fraud, potential man, bum this, bum that. It is pretty crazy how all of this turned out. However, the first to defend Megumi are folks that are devoted to his return and his retribution as a character. Or maybe they think that he's doing just fine as he is. He's only 15 after all. See, you would have to be compassionate to Megumi's feelings and understand his loss and his purpose as a sorcerer, because by now he's lost everything dear to him and he's had enough. However, my brothers and sisters, how far does that compassion reach? How many of Megumi's friends would have to die until he decides for himself whether he has the right to live or not, whether he wants to do something with his strength? While I agree the community is way too harsh on Megumi and so quick to hop on the hate train just to make a laugh out of him, blaming Megumi for what Sukuna is doing is rather disingenuous to his character, and I'm sure he's much stronger than people give him credit for. But in reality, there seriously is a problem with Fushiguro, and it has a lot to do with his appeal as a character, his mindset, and his screen time in the series, and these things are very subjective. Megumi is a really selfish character. He's almost a bigger example of selfishness than either Gojo or Sukuna. And in today's video, you're going to see why that's both good and bad, especially in Megumi's case. In the beginning of the series, he had first struggled with confidence in himself. He was always willing to take one for the team, and Megumi underestimates himself and his allies, undoubtedly because he always had Mahoraga when it came down to the last option. But that mindset itself sets Megumi back. Gojo said if he kept thinking that way, then he can forget even matching Nanami's level. Gojo told him to give it his all and be greedier.
Oh, what the hell?
Which this early on was probably one of Megumi's most peak moments ever. In that moment, he decided not to use Mahoraga, not to throw his life away, but to imagine himself stronger. And that's exactly the type of mindset and determination Gojo was referring to. However, Megumi does have a tendency to hold on to his old habits, because time and time again, when Megumi is pressured enough, he is willing to give up everything and summon Mahoraga with his own resolve. Mahoraga is an interesting part of his power, and Megumi's power as a sorcerer is very solid, but he isn't the most impressive. People might say that Megumi fights scary, but it's more so that he is a very strategic and he is a very tactical fighter. He can use his shadows in a very unique way. He's one of the only students who can use domain expansion, and he has an incredibly versatile curse technique. However, at best, even now, Megumi just barely is around that high tier grade 1 level, just barely. And that's important because this is a part of why Mahoraga is viewed so negatively, because Megumi is just not strong enough. When he fights, there's almost always a back door. He's on the back foot most of the time, trying to keep up. Unless he is confident that he will defeat his opponent, Megumi will always have his last option to resort to. It's impressive he can use domain expansion, however, it's incomplete and highly situational unconditional since he needs an actual enclosed space to fight. Hand to hand, Megumi is okay, however higher level opponents would destroy him in close quarters, and even Reggie Star had an edge in straight up hands. In Megumi's last real meaningful fight in the series, Megumi seriously extreme high diffed a register man with receipt contract powers. No disrespect, but I don't think anyone thinks of Reggie and thinks of a top tier. It was like a peak jujutsu fight with a very low power ceiling. Many of his actual fights are just like that. He was very useful in Shibuya versus Dagon's domain, but he was fading fast. And against top tiers, he just gets his ass beat. At the very least, he reacted to Toji that one time, but he knew that they had strength that he could not match without his trump card. Megumi has no reverse curse technique, an incomplete domain expansion, no black flash, and by today's standards, his hand to hand is dog water. Yeah, he's looking pretty rough, but thankfully, Megumi's talent lies within his 10 Shadows curse technique. The 10 Shadows is one of, if not the most broken curse technique in Jujutsu Kaisen. Unfortunately, it took Sukuna, aka the strongest sorcerer ever, to realize that 10 Shadows has the capability to defeat the Limitless. In fact, it actually counters it because of Maharaga's adaptation alone. And that single Shikigami is what sets this curse technique apart. However, the user has to be strong enough to utilize these things properly. Sukuna tamed Maharaga, unlocked 3 new Shikigami, upgraded the old Shikigami by 10-fold, and used this power to defeat high-level sorcerers and even keep up with Gojo, even defeat Gojo. But that's simply because Sukuna is him. He's doing things Megumi probably couldn't even dream of, and it's so casual for him. Now you'd see why they call him Potential Man. If you could have any hope that Megumi would ever be doing these type of things, I'd invest too, but it's still hard to say if these things would ever come into fruition. Think about this. It's fair to say since Yuji had the ability to learn from Sukuna and perform better as a sorcerer, by default, Megumi should too, right? I mean, Sukuna was using his own curse technique better than Megumi could. But I'll be real with you. If Megumi came back and retained all of his memories and his skills from Sukuna, we went from high-diffing Reggie Star to a tamed Maharaga plus high-level 10 Shadows use. It's simply too easy. Megumi himself said a Jujutsu sorcerer's growth never comes easy. Yet I feel like that's what a lot of fans might expect from Megumi's comeback. So if Megumi does make a return, hopefully by then he'd retain a moderate level of power, or things are resolved, or Gege gives an explanation why a sorcerer who gave up with nothing for an entire month became this strong. However, brothers and sisters, his strength is only one aspect of Megumi, and that's important for a sorcerer because they have to be strong enough to forge their own paths. And Megumi has a profound sense of self, though his selfishness will cause him a lot of heartache. I don't even think Megumi realized how much it would actually affect his resolve. Like we said from the start, Megumi is a really selfish person, maybe even to a fault. His entire ideal is to save those whether it's fair or not. That's the same reason that he decided to save Yuji, which actually made an entirely different mess altogether. Megumi just did not want to see a good person die, and that ties into his most important motivation, Sumiki Fushiguro. Now Sumiki is his older stepsister, unrelated by blood since she has different biological parents. However, Toji remarried to Miss Fushiguro, and Megumi and Sumiki have been in the same household since they were kids. Sumiki is what Megumi considered a good person. A hard ass like Megumi wouldn't say it out loud, but she is everything to him. He loves Sumiki very much. It's interesting, when Megumi was forced into the Jujutsu world because of Gojo and their own money situation, Megumi found it a pain because he doesn't know who to save or what's the right thing to do as sorcerers. That makes him very morally ambiguous as a character. However, when Sumiki fell to Kenjaku's curse, he then realized he wants to save his sister. He wants to save that good person. In fact, after Shibuya, that was Megumi's sole purpose in the Culling games. Everything he did was for Sumiki's sake. He just as easily would even kill for her. However, he could not do it alone. He asked his peers to help him. He specifically almost begged Yuji to help him with his problem. Start by saving me, Itadori. And folks like Yuta, Maki, Yuji, they were concerned for his sake and his family because they don't want to see their dear friends suffer. And if they can help, then they will. I mean, Megumi was locked in. He was well informed. He gathered his allies. He made a set plan. And man, he was setting himself up for the biggest disappointment of his life. Megumi did not take into account that Sumiki was an incarnated sorcerer, and a whack job like Yorozu incarnated into her. All of his plans in that moment fell apart, and Megumi completely logged out. That was it. His soul shattered, and that was the perfect moment for Sukuna to take his body. Since then, he was drowned in evil, and to make doubly sure Megumi does not resist, Sukuna killed his sister Sumiki in cold blood with Megumi's own curse technique. That completely sealed the deal. Megumi was done at that point because he lost all of his motivation, and Megumi now belongs to Sukuna. Not only that, but after a month of drowning in misery, Sukuna killed his teacher Gojo, who basically raised Megumi, and that's just to add even more misery to his already effed up life. So it's not hard to actually see why when the sorcerers tried to reach out to Megumi and Yuji tried to get him back, Megumi completely gave up and no longer wants to live. He's had enough. And that's completely understandable. Though I can't go easy on him because this is also extremely selfish, and it's actually a little hypocritical. When Megumi asked for his friend's help, he's basically asking them to risk their lives as a sorcerer. When he went to Yuji, he just found out Yuji wasn't even sure if he had the right to live or not. In his mind, he just killed all those people in Shibuya. But nah, it's our fault. Don't be selfish and give up all alone. Help me out, save me. We aren't heroes fighting for justice. We're jujutsu sorcerers. No one can ever truly judge us, so we must continually prove the worth of our existence. And we don't have the luxury of thinking about ourselves. We've just got to save people. How ironic is it that Megumi says these things to encourage Yuji, yet when shit hits the fan, he does the very opposite. In fact, he drags Yuji into it, and Yuji tried to warn him because as long as he's around, Megumi will suffer. This is one of the most tragic situations in the series. Folks may say that he needs more than just for Yuji to say, "Hey bro, wake up," like Megumi needs his own Toto speech. But Megumi fully understands what being a sorcerer means. He said it himself. They don't have the luxury of thinking about themselves. Megumi needs to live up to his own words. When Sumiki died, he was not able to overcome that darkness in his heart. He's not that strong. And now he does not care. It's interesting when we want to mention Yuji's breakdown as well, because many people are biased when it comes to him. Their situation is almost exactly the same. Their resolve being broken and Sukuna taking advantage of them. And you can't really measure the weight in their hearts for how much they suffer in those moments, but Megumi suffered alone with no Toto to save him for a lot longer and lost people that were closer to him than in Yuji's circumstances. However, it's strange in Shibuya, the words that were said, the parallels to Mahito, the steady buildup, along with the people that were there for Yuji, was some of Gege's best writing. So it's easier to connect with Yuji that way. Rather with Megumi, we're seeing all of this effort the sorcerers do to reach him, and Megumi doesn't even want to be saved. Don't be selfish and give up all alone. Those were his words. It's like Gojo said, you cannot save someone who's not prepared to be saved. In Yuji's case, Yuji is a stronger person than Megumi. Sukuna cannot take over Yuji's soul ever. It will always stand up to him. That's why Sukuna chose Megumi, because even if he turned out like a cage like Yuji, this time he can actually break Megumi. And that leads us to the mess that we're in today. Megumi's weakness is Sukuna's strength. Gege said he already planned out Megumi's conclusion, which, given Gege's track record, that sounds very grim. However, there's hope yet that he will return and maybe his character will actually grow and get stronger. But for that to happen, Sukuna may actually have to leave his body and maybe something involving the merger. But ultimately, his strength would probably require time we might not have, and a reason for him to keep on living. But chapter by chapter, it's looking like if he won't wake up and lock in, his friends will have to kill him, or else Sukuna will destroy them all. As shady as Megumi is in his morality, Sumiki saw something in Megumi. She's almost motherly in that way, and she makes him a better person. When he was about to kill Remy in cold blood, her words echoed at the back of his mind. She is his beloved sister. They are family. She gave him peace, but now that light in Megumi's life is gone, and he is drowned in evil and darkness. Megumi is a lot better and a lot stronger than he thinks he is. I just wish that he saw that himself. So hopefully someone is able to eventually tell him that. In the end, Megumi is not to blame for what Sukuna has done. Sukuna is the real villain. Though Megumi isn't really a good person either. He isn't really all that strong as a sorcerer, and unfortunately his soul is weaker than Sukuna's. He is a tragedy. An absolute tragedy. And I think it's unfortunate Megumi ended up with such a bad rep, and he by no means deserves the sheer amount of hate that he gets, specifically because of how Sukuna is using him. But even though he is suffering, his character is not appealing to everyone. It takes some serious faith and patience in his character for him to grow and become stronger for his sake. It's like believing in a character that doesn't even believe in himself. So please excuse me if he isn't my GOAT, if it isn't my cup of tea. However, it is good to know that there are fans who are patient enough to wait on Megumi Masterclass, if it ever even comes to that. So is Megumi a bum? Of course not. Yet in my opinion, he isn't the best that Gege ever made. He's not without his flaws, his setbacks. He's disappointing. Sometimes he sucks, but at least he's well written. He is a very complicated character. Gege knows what he is doing with Megumi, and he has the potential to be better. Gege has already shown us what he can do, and through Sukuna, he's shown us what he could do, but now it's about time he showed us what he has to do right now. And Megumi has to stand up and fight. For Jujutsu sorcerers, that is the punishment we must endure.